far too often the term legend is used in the context of people it doesn't really apply to, but I can't think of a better description of the guy that I'm walking the bridge on in London than Robert Plant. Robert, thank you so much. Did I make you blush there?
Well, I'm a modest guy, you know, and that's a big word. And also, you're just about to run over somebody directly behind you.
Well, they'll move. They see Robert Plant coming. Robert has a great new CD, which is in stores on Tuesday, November 4th, called 66 to Timbuktu. 2 discs that chronicle his entire career. It's just an amazing collection. Robert, I'm interested. Why did you decide to take the route of such an ambitious project to do a 2-disc set when a lot of artists today are doing the single-disc greatest hits albums? You actually went more ambitious than that.
Well, I don't think it's ambitious. I just think that there's such a kind of an interesting story to tell, if you like, or better than that. Probably my musical ambition has been vast. And from the very, very beginnings, the first time I ever walked into a studio with all the nerves and everything that surrounded it, to some of the more playful things, to the very serious aspects of what I've tried to do, what I think was groundbreaking for me, the challenges that I've taken. I don't think they can be, I think they can't really be part of just a one moment of a compact disc. People are aware of the stuff that's been successful on the radio throughout the United States and so on, but the stuff that I'm really interested in is the other stuff too, the stuff that was, you know, quite an achievement. And to leave that somewhere out of the way would be folly, really. I mean, and I've worked with some amazing people who would never have even seen the light of day if this second CD hadn't appeared. You know, it's quite alluring for me.
Well, we're going to talk about a lot of the different people that you've worked with, as well as a lot of the great recordings that you've made both before and after Led Zeppelin. I want to get to one that you made called Manic Nirvana, and a track, Tie Dye on the Highway, which is on the new anthology, which is a great track. I'm curious, though, I've heard that Manic Nirvana was actually a self-reference on your part.
Well, my friends, actually my friend and manager, Bill Kerbishley, he used to say, "Don't panic, Manic," because I'm always in a hurry. It's got to be right. We've got to do it this way. It needs to be like this. It needs, and yeah, I see bliss, calm, crystal clear understanding, but I'm going like this to get it. So it's a bit of a contradiction in terms. Tie Dye on the Highway was my gentle, somewhat humorous, in title alone, salute to the wonderful days, to the days when we thought maybe we were going to move things around a little bit with our youth culture. And it's come back again over the years with the Deadheads, with people like Fish, with the whole movement of festivals and bands who have great success in a live situation, who encourage and lure huge crowds who are not playing the same pop game. You know, it's not a mainstream thing. It's kind of, it's like that kind of fringe stuff, but it's so big and it's so important and it's so necessary to give a really good tapestry of contemporary music. So Tie Dye was a kind of, you know, reference to that great time and its continuity now.
So much more to talk about with Robert Plant. We're going to cover everything here, and of course his great new 2-CD collection, 66 to Timbuktu. Back with more from London with Robert Plant on VH1 Classic.
You're watching Robert Plant all day long on VH1 Classic.
Well, this is one of the many reasons why I love my job here at VH1 Classic. I get the pleasure of walking through the market in London with none other than Robert Plant, talking about his great new anthology, which is coming out in stores on Tuesday, November 4th, called 66 to Timbuktu. The recording, there's some amazing stuff on here, Robert. You've got stuff as early as 1966 with You Better Run, and then you've got a song you recorded, Win My Train Fare Home, which you recorded this year in, of all places, Timbuktu. I got to ask you, I don't even know where Timbuktu is. How did you find that place, and how did you decide to work there?
Well, you know, this music is it's the vast medium, and the guys I'm working with in Strange Sensation have got links with amazing groups from the country of Mali, And Mali is a West African country. It's the majority of it is below the Sahara Desert. There are different predominant sections of the community. Some are called Tuareg, who are the high cheekboned African guys who spend a lot of their time as nomads moving with their stock. They wear sheshes, they wear turbans across here like this, so the only thing you ever see of them is their eyes. And they're pretty much living the life that they have done for thousands of years. Further into the south of the country, you have the black Africans who live south of the river Niger. And you have this amazing conglomeration of music and collision of culture and style. And this festival, the Festival of the Desert, was in its third year when I went, so they'd already had two previously. And there were people there was a band from the United States of Navajo Indians playing from, I think, Arizona. Yeah, maybe Scottsdale or somewhere. No, that would be wrong.
Somewhere from the West?
No, it's, and they're a thrash metal band.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And so you've got people coming from all over the world who are aware of this festival because its importance is to highlight the culture in the area and to also bring about some kind of international awareness of the music. So it's no great mystery. It's just basically something that it's a meeting, an annual meeting, which is getting bigger and bigger. I met a guy from Seattle who was born and raised in Scotland, who was working for Microsoft, and had gone from Seattle to Edinburgh, picked up his boy, who was 24,
wow,
and then moved into the desert. And we spent great times with lots of different people from, even the BBC in London, they sent a guy out, a very famous DJ called Andy Kershaw, who's got great reputation in Britain, playing eclectic and very, very obscure or fringe music. And the thing becomes really, really something quite special now. In fact, it's threatening to become so
mainstream,
so well known that they're not going to be able to cope with the number of people who get there.
Right.
Now to get there, you have to fly for 8 hours to Mopti, which is the capital of the country, and then it takes maybe 30 hours of driving, and often the road disappears completely. The road is gone because the desert is constantly moving south and encroaching on the roads that the French built in the first place. So
wow,
it's quite an interesting journey.
Wow, it sounds like it.
Yeah, and you meet a lot of very, very amazing people along the way. And I've made a lot of new friends. I've got a lot of new musical opportunities, which give me a life in music way beyond anything I could have ever imagined. So I can play some wild rock and roll 1 minute, and I can go there and play wild rock and roll to the Tuaregs. When I played, they just didn't know what was going on, the guys there. But I learnt a lot. I learnt a lot about music and about how limited our Western music is. So I had a great time.
Well, you've never been one to shy away from experimenting with different styles of music. In 1984, see something you like over here?
I don't know whether I get those on now, but probably getting them off is more important. Yeah.
There you go. In 1984, you took a break from the solo work you were doing to release the one album that you did with the Honey Drippers, which was an enormous success. Rockin' at Midnight, Sea of Love was also a huge hit for you. Tell us about that experience with the Honey Drippers. How did that idea come about? And were you surprised by the success of that album, that sort of style for someone like you?
Well, Ahmet Erdogan formed Atlantic Records in 1948. He's the master. He's got more stories to tell than any of us. And his recordings and his work in rhythm and blues and black music with Aretha Franklin, you know, Ray Charles, the Drifters, the Coasters. And then moving into the white music, he signed Led Zeppelin. He was involved with Buffalo Springfield, even Genesis and Yes, Iron Butterfly, you know, lots and lots of... And then the jazz side of it all. So he used to say to me, Robert, he said, you've got too much knowledge about the 50s and about black music and about rockabilly and rock and roll and doo-wop and stuff like that. Why don't you do some of this stuff? Because
Put it to use, yeah.
Yeah. He said, you can sing a ballad. I said, but it's cheesy music, you know. It's kind of, it doesn't have the challenge that I needed. But anyway, we talked about it, and in the end we went in a studio in New York, and in an afternoon, with the help of Jeff Beck, and later with Jimmy Page, we created a little mini album which was a great success. And it was what it was, you know. Similar to the thing that I did with Jules Holland last year. It's good time rock and roll and good time weepy ballads.
So much more still to come as we continue with Robert Plant here in London on VH1 Classic. I have the great pleasure to be walking the streets of London with none other than Robert Plant. We are on our way to the Karma Holistic Center
Which
here
is
in
something we really need, of course.
yes,
a little bit of good karma.
little rub down or something.
Steady.
Robert has a great CD which he's celebrating the release of called 66 to Timbuktu, which is coming out in stores this Tuesday, November 4th. It features 35 tracks, 2 CDs loaded with music, and one of the really cool things about the CD, Robert, that I found particularly interesting was the real early stuff that's on there. The stuff that you recorded, I guess, closer to 66 with some of your early bands. Tell me what it was like to go back and hear some of that music again, and how you feel it held up from a technical aspect.
Well, it was a revelation, really, to be honest. I hadn't even thought about it for such a long time. I hadn't even, you know, I mean, I was aware of certain tracks, but there was a lot of stuff that I unearthed that I'd completely forgotten about. For example, Red for Danger, which is something I did a little later on, which is kind of cute. It's very, you know, stylistic, and one of my friends said, "You don't want to put that on there, that's too cheesy," or whatever it is. I said, no, it's cute, it's good. So I really have not paid any great attention to anything from the past. I never do. I always think about what I want to do, and I never look at the body of work and all the stuff that I've either done and achieved something with, or done and put in a corner. I never even think about it. I never even have thought about it until I started unearthing stuff for the Zeppelin project earlier on in the year, and I came across these tracks and went, well, and that's pretty neat. You know, what about that one and that one and that one? Because the ones that were on American radio are what they are. They're well known. Some of them are well known. They had different degrees of success, but these other tracks are, well, they're kind of cool little nuggets, you know.
So I imagine it brought back a lot of memories for you to hear those again. And how did you feel they held up? Did you have to do a lot of touch-up work, or?
Yeah, we had to clean them up a bit because, you know, just the scratches and the bumps of the years. But by and large, how did they hold up? They're all so varied that it's a very difficult thing to put one song. To create a running order was really quite difficult. And in the end, I just made it so as it was chronological. So it began and ended. It began at the beginning and it ended at this point. No.
Well, we have plenty more to come as I continue with Robert Plant, and we're going to take a walk into the Holistic Center now and see what they can do for us at Karma, and come back and give you some more hanging out with Robert Plant here in London. The 2-disc set includes a number of great covers. Well, Robert, I just mentioned covers as your new anthology, as the type of recording when you redo other people's songs. I understand that you have another word for it. You prefer to call them heirlooms. I actually like your term better. Explain that a little bit.
Well, I guess, you know, these are, for me, the content of the songs, all the way along the line from when I was a kid, before I had the gift of writing, and the sort of collusions with people, that the relationships in writing, which is a very subtle and sensitive thing to create. I was into so much music, from Howlin' Wolf to Love, Buffalo Springfield, whatever it was. So you always wanted to touch these songs, but often when I was a kid, you know, or when we were all kids, we mashed around and we didn't do them much justice. But now when I go back, I think I've got enough headspace to say, okay, I can attack that now. So when I listen to the covers from 1966, 67, the Band of Joy stuff, Hey Joe and For What It's Worth, it's amazing because it wasn't subtle, it was just like a big hammer.
Right.
With Bonham playing wild drums, with Kevin Gammon playing this frantic guitar, and with me singing like I gotta get a gig from somewhere. So every line was almost over-delivered, you know? And the enthusiasm was fantastic. And yeah, I mean, that's why they had to go on. They had to be, sooner or later, they had to appear.
So at that point in your career, in those earlier days, doing covers was almost a sort of audition, you would say, because you said you used it to kind of get a gig, right?
That's right, yeah. And also, I think really, the music, the climate of music was on 2 or 3 different parallel levels running along. You've got the blatant out-and-out pop, which, you know, from Bobby Goldsboro to Cliff Richard to, you know, Andy Williams. Mm-hmm. Then you've got the kind of Cas Sills type Fifth Dimension quasi-hippie area, and underneath it all you've got this fantastic field of wild existentialist music, you know. And I belonged in the latter category, and we just used to fly through these songs and fly through that whole genus of music and look longingly towards America, which had always been, for me and for a lot of English musicians, the home of invention.
Mm-hmm. Well, one of the covers that you did was the Youngbloods' Darkness, Darkness.
Sure.
Tell us a little bit about the significance of that song for you and how it made it onto the new anthology.
Well, I didn't get to play in America, obviously, until I joined the Yardbirds, which became Led Zeppelin. And in the early days, Zeppelin played many of the big rock festivals at the time. There was Texas International Pop Festival, it was called. There was Seattle Rock Festival. Central Park with B.B. King. There were a lot of places that you played where you came upon other musicians, your peer group. And it was fascinating to see all this American music. And the Youngbloods and Jesse Colin Young were performing Darkness, Darkness when I was about 20 years old. And I used to sit on the side of the stage, cross-legged, with as many beads as I could get around my neck, going, man, these lyrics, the whole, you know, vibration of what was coming out of a lot of American, the thought processes behind the songs were so good, so on it for me. So Darkness, Darkness was one of those moments where I thought somebody had really got it right.
Right.
Perfect piece of music.
Yeah. Well, we've got plenty more still to come as I continue here in London with Robert Plant on VH1 Classic. Sitting next to me, none other than Robert Plant, who in a couple days, Tuesday, November 4th, as a matter of fact, has a great new 2-disc anthology coming out titled 66 to Timbuktu. Thanks again, Robert, for hanging out with me today.
Thank you, it's a pleasure.
In addition to hits like Big Log and Tall Cool One, 66 to Timbuktu includes a number of rare and previously unreleased recordings, a true collector's item for all Robert Plant fans. Robert, although you've obviously worked with a lot of different musicians throughout your time, even with Led Zeppelin, I imagine that after Led Zeppelin, starting out your first time as a solo artist and getting a solo band together and kind of putting yourself out there as a solo artist must have been difficult for you. I had read a quote actually somewhere where you yourself said you felt like an old rock god and were a little confused as to what you wanted to do. Take us back, if you can, to that time in your thought process and becoming a solo artist for the first time.
Sure. Well, the passing of John Bonham had a horrendous effect upon everybody actually, but on myself, because he and I had been friends for a long time before the glory. We played together when we were much younger. And he was always very confrontational with me. I remember playing a ballroom someplace and I was captivating 15 people with my skill and art. And he stood in front of me and at the end he said, you know, you're all right. He said, but you'd be a lot better with me around. And I said, yeah, but you live too far away. I can't afford the gas to pick you up with your drum kit. So there were so many of these anecdotes that we shared, so much stuff that we shared, that at the end of it all, when John passed away, I really didn't have any intention of trying to get out into the big game again, initially. So I formed a little band, and I had to really take my music and my ambition and my craft into another place altogether. So I formed a group called the Honey Drippers, which was a pickup band of friends from the neighborhood. And we traveled around England playing little clubs. And it was cathartic in a way because I was playing songs from the 50s. I was just playing whatever I wanted to play. I said to the guys who ran the clubs, if they advertised my name or mentioned it, I'd just pull up and just drive on. I was not going to go and trade on anything from that time, previously. I was 32 years old and I just didn't know exactly what to do. So as the sort of clouds cleared away, I began to think about writing, trying to get into writing beautiful songs again, trying to create a production sound and doing it completely on my own, which was a very challenging thought because I'd always worked with John for years and years and years, and I'd had 12 years of working with Jimmy and John Paul, so, and I knew that none of that could exist again, not really, you know. So I had to go out and start fresh, and I found people, some guys I knew, some sort of acquaintances like Cozy Powell I knew vaguely. Robbie Blunt was a guitarist who'd played with me in the Honey Drippers, and I'd known him since the Crawling Kingsnakes back in '65, and I used to pick him up from school and grab his guitar from his parents and just go and do little gigs. So it was really almost a marriage of convenience. There were people that I knew. It wasn't as testy a group as it became later on, bringing in very jagged, edgy, you know, people. It was just a kind of bunch of really nice guys, and we made 3 or 4 albums together, you know. But it was very tentative, and many times I thought, you know, did I really want to create crafted pieces of music and throw them back out into this game? You know, and for a long time I was very disinclined to do that. I didn't really want to do it. You know, I was watching how music was moving, and then I thought, yeah, wait a minute. You know, I'm 32. I've got a few more babies left. So then I began recording seriously.
And as you continued to record seriously, you once again, from time to time, work with Jimmy Page again on one of the tracks that's included on your new anthology, Tall Cool One. Tell us a little bit about some of the differences and the similarities over the years of working with Jimmy Page. How have things changed, and how have they also stayed the same?
Well, we kept our distance after John's passing. There were things, he went immediately and created some film music for a Charles Bronson movie.
Death Wish.
Yeah, which I thought was absolutely fantastic. Yep. I thought the way that he'd worked, what he used to call his guitar army in the old days, the way that he'd got these compositions was really technically excellent, and it had enough tension and enough darkness to
suit the film too very well.
It suited the film, but it worked as a piece of incidental music. It really worked great. It didn't matter about vocals. It was time, and he didn't need a vocalist really. He just needed to cut this music. And there goes the 12:15 train to Edinburgh, loaded with Scottish soccer fans. So I went my way, he went his way, and we met occasionally, and we crossed paths, and we went to various. People gave us gongs for great notoriety from the past and stuff, and we talked. And I appeared on one of his albums. I sang and co-wrote a track called The Only One with him, and he worked with me with the Honey Drippers. I got him to put a couple of solos on a couple of tracks that I did, which Ahmet Ertegun co-produced with me, which were amazing moments really, because he just came in with his guitar and his amp and just glued these tracks, these guitar parts onto things that were already built in, especially stuff with a big orchestra like Sea of Love. I mean, it was so delicate. The song was a kind of pastiche in a way. It was a 50s love song, weepy spoof, you know, and to get that delicate thing there, you know, to come off the street, to get out of a cab, to set your amp up, to turn it on, and to have his kind of persona and to play like that, It's hit and miss, but it worked good.
Something people don't associate so much with Jimmy Page
Well,
either.
I don't know, no, because Jimmy's playing is very lyrical.
Right.
And it's very delicate. But I mean, just to get out of a cab and say, okay,
Sure.
and you play him the track and say, here it is, this is
Yeah.
it.
Well,
Do it.
we're going to talk more in depth about all this stuff and all these different projects and musicians that you've worked with. We have plenty more to come as I continue here with Robert Plant in London on VH1 Classic. I'm here at Karma Holistic Center in the Camden section of London, and I am joined by Robert Plant, who's been nice enough to spend some time with me as we talk about his great new anthology. Robert, thank you again for hanging out all day with us.
Thank you.
And the reason we're here? Well, how about a 35-track, 2-disc anthology that covers Plant's career outside of Led Zeppelin, before and after that group. It's called 66 to Timbuktu, and it arrives in stores this Tuesday, November 4th. Robert, looking over all the music on all these discs and the incredible array of different sounds and all the things that you've done musically in your career, first thing that came to my mind listening to it is, what hasn't this guy done yet? So what's left for you that you'd still like to accomplish musically that you haven't gotten to yet?
Well, you know, I found this year, in January, I went to Timbuktu in Mali. I went with Justin Adams and Skin from Strange Sensation, my band. And I met up with so many different musicians in the middle of nowhere, and I heard music that I could never have imagined. I didn't just hear music where it starts and finishes. I heard stuff that I'd never ever heard before. I heard people in groups breathing, creating different breath, call and response with breath, where they exhale, 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 2 different tones.
Wow.
And very light hand clapping, and then this amazing vocal over the top. And I heard when I was a kid, I think there was a woman called Odetta, who did some stuff from further down in Africa where you click with the voice in the throat. There's a kind of click before you start singing. But what I heard there was phenomenal. Now, I can't do that, but I know that if I try, I can do it. And I would like to try and do something like that and mix it so that it sounds like Bo Diddley meets John Lee Hooker meets the Cramps. But you just create this kind of weird juxtaposition between 2 banks of voices. So there's loads of things to do. There's loads of things that I haven't done, and there's loads of things that I've done which I haven't done very well, which I can improve on. So, as the days go by, I invent. And right now, I'm in the middle of inventing yet another album with Strange Sensation, which is using rhythms from the deep Sahara, but it turns into some pretty heavy rock and roll. But it's the juxtaposing of different musical colors. It basically started back in my teenage days when I was a kid in the band of Joy, and I was living next door to a family from Bengal. And I began to hear rhythms and stuff like that, and then Jimmy and I had a penchant and a leaning, and we went to Thailand and India and Morocco together way back, way back, before there was any sort of move towards this dreadful term world music, you know. It's such a kind of encompassing all coffee table moment sound thing. So there's lots to do. It's just, you know, I want to do stuff where I go, whoa, how did I do that?
Stuff that challenges you.
Sure. Well, your challenges, or it's so harmonious or beautiful, or it's so aggressive and angular that it gives me the flexibility. I create my own flexibility. That's what I was like before I met the Yardbirds, and that's what I've tried to do ever since. It's been a kind of schizoid career, really, because it just zigzags around like this. And I don't think I've ever really tried to play it safe, you know, so I've got lots to do.
Well, a lot of people have also mentioned that you've certainly had your dabblings in folk music. As a matter of fact, Fate of Nations, a lot of people, some of the reviews that came out at the time said, well, that really shows that he's a rock and roll folk singer. The track on there that's on your anthology is Calling to You, which I think is a bit more of a straight up rocker, but that album in general, people consider to be your more or less folk statement. Would you agree with that?
No, not at all, no. I mean, it just, you know, you get a guitar and you play the chord with an arpeggio fingerstyle. It doesn't make it a folk song, you know. I mean, there's a softer side to it, but with Fate of Nations, there was a lot of layering of different guitar sounds. It was probably the best, at that point, up to that point, it was perhaps the only produced record that I've ever made in my life, up to 1993, because it was really produced. With Zepp, we knew what the arrangements were, we changed them in the studio, we got great sounds. Jimmy was the kind of, I guess, quality control, but we were all in on it. But to bring in an outside producer and to start creating songs with lots of filigree made it, I guess if it sounds folky, to me, you know, it's like saying Calexico are a folk group, you know, or whatever it is. I think it was just more detail in the music.
Misinterpreted in some ways, though.
Well, it doesn't matter. It's okay. Impressions are great.
Yeah.
And without opinions, we haven't got anything, have we?
Yeah, absolutely. We have plenty more still to come as I continue here in London with Robert Plant. So much more to talk about. Stay with us. Well, I am clearly not in the VH1 Classic studios. I am in London, and for good reason. Robert Plant has been nice enough to make some time to talk about his great new anthology, 66 to Timbuktu. Thanks again, Robert.
Thanks again.
The anthology is a 2-disc, 35-track CD that encapsulates Plant's illustrious career outside of Led Zeppelin. It arrives in stores this Tuesday, November 4th. You're looking at its great cover right now. Robert, it's been quite a year for your fans. One of the big highlights this year, of course, is the Led Zeppelin DVD and the triple CD, How the West Was Won. Tell me a little bit about your reaction to the overwhelming success to that, and looking back now that it's been out a few months on both the CD and the DVD, how do you feel about it?
Well, first of all, I feel very, very proud of the DVD because for years the sort of reputation of Led Zeppelin as a memory and as a part of music history has only been referenced through The Song Remains the Same, which was a film which was made in 75 or 73, whatever it was. And although it's interesting and it's cute, sonically it doesn't make it. And its performance is only from one particular moment in time. And you know, it has its high points, but to me, it never really represented. If you're never ever going to see Led Zepp again, then you ought to see the bits from different parts of time chronologically. And I think the DVD really did bring the uniqueness of Led Zepp and the way that it grew into much more into perspective than it might have done otherwise. Otherwise, nobody would have known it was just memory and legend and all that stuff. So for that, it's great. But most importantly for me, the whole thing, the DVD, the CDs and stuff, it's just to remind us about John Bonham, you know, just about how strong and how crucial his role was, and in fact how that rhythm section kicked ass out of all unbelievable sort of blue-eyed funk. We used to play with bands who kind of would run away. They just wouldn't turn up. Or we'd play for a couple of nights with a band and then that would be it, somebody would get the flu. Because it was relentless, and it wasn't about being competitive with other musical outfits or whatever. It was just about being us. And I think that if the great achievement of these two, you know, adventures really is the fact that it shows you or allows you to hear what the band was like in a totally different context. And I think that's great. I mean, I think it's crucial, and you know, there was a lot of great work done to go through all those different times and to pull those pictorial images together.
You bring up a great point about John Bonham, though, because I unfortunately never got the chance to see Led Zeppelin perform live, and hearing that record and seeing the DVD, the records are one thing, but to see that guy in action and how he drove the band is really remarkable.
Well, that's right, and I mean, anecdotes, you know, the great thing is that even with Nebworth in 1979 when we played there, we thought we had a real bad gig. We thought both gigs were bad. But I was watching Achilles' Last Stand one day, and I was just marveling at the tightness of the band. I mean, I was almost like a kind of, not even a ringmaster. I was like an accessory that could be just brought in and out, and I didn't mind that at all. I could have done a bit of juggling or card tricks, but the thing is, what was going on there, man, that was so hot, and it was so on it. I mean, it was, we used to listen to a lot of, you know, Parliament, George Clinton, you know, Sly Stone, Bobby Womack, all that kind of funk stuff. And those guys had it down so good. Also, what was good about it was the band toughened up. I toughened up. I went from being a kind of fey, embarrassed, cigarette-smoking nonce at the beginning of it all. And at the end, my eyes, my whole being, my body language and everything, I was there and I wasn't taking any prisoners. And I probably wasn't stopping long. I was on my way, always on my way. And I liked that. But I'm proud of it. I think it's good. And it was good to see it again. And really, not many bands have got that privilege or that, maybe the horror of seeing what the passage of time can do.
Well, it's great stuff, and it was great to look at, and you mentioned Song Remains the Same. For me, one of the highlights are the additional songs that are on the DVD that didn't make it. I just thought that was just tremendous footage.
I just think that the wildness of the early Led Zeppelin, before we learned our stagecraft, before we got it down, it was very, you know, crucial stuff.
Well, we're going to talk a lot more about your anthology.
When this train goes by.
To Timbuktu.
Hey,
as soon as the train goes by, we'll be back. I've got plenty more. We're in London with Robert Plant on VH1 Classic.
Watching Robert Plant all day long on VH1 Classic.
No, it's not the VH1 Classic Studios. I am at Karma Holistic Center in London, not just for a massage, of course, but to talk to the one and only Robert Plant. Robert, thank you so much.
Mind you, I do massage on the side.
Lovers of rock and roll, which also means that you're fans of Robert Plant. There's a new 2-disc anthology arriving in stores on Tuesday, November 4th, that you just got to have. It's called 66 to Timbuktu, which looks back on Robert's career both before and after Led Zeppelin. Of all your musical achievements, Robert, and there's too many to even get into in just one sitting, I'm wondering for you personally, what are some of the highlights? What stands out for you?
Oof. I think making my very first record was really, I mean, it's a long time to be singing. Some people say, well, why are you singing, you know? But the very first record I ever made was the most nerve-wracking but fantastic achievement. I was 17 years old. I came down here to London. I'd only been to London once before. It was like, you know, I felt like Dick Whittington. I needed a cat and a stick with a bag over my back or a spotted handkerchief, and I was in Tin Pan Alley in London with all these pro-musical guys who really knew what to do, and they did 2 or 3 sessions a day, you know. And I just came in through the door into a room and went, oh my God, what's going on here? There was musicians from miles. You could see horn players, guitarists, girl singers. And I mean, I didn't even know whether I got the bottle to sing it. I was so nervous. But that was a fantastic moment. And that was the moment that opened my account. And that was the moment that allowed me to go back to the black country and say, right, up yours. See? This is that. I listen to it now and don't know who the hell it is. Which Robert Plant was that, you know?
Right. And that was at 17? Mm-hmm. How about along the way, some of the other highlights? Maybe one with Zeppelin, maybe one with your solo career after Zeppelin?
I think perhaps our trips in Morocco, Jimmy Page and myself, I think the creation of Kashmir as a piece of music,
sure,
as the abstraction of the lyric and the grandeur of the music, the actual composition of the music and the actual performance was absolutely amazing. I think the outro of Kashmir, the fade, the way it goes out into the, you know, into the desert, if you like, was a real major moment for me.
Epic is the best way to describe
Well,
it, for me at least.
but you know, the thing is, when we made it, we didn't see epic. We didn't know that we were ever going to be talking about it later. We're talking about it now. It might have been like In the Light or some other song which sort of is there, but it is grand, and it was so on it and so honest. And you know, there was no retrospective of Led Zeppelin. We didn't look back and go, oh, we've got to do another Whole Lot of Love, or oh, we must do another Black Country Woman, or whatever it was. You just did something new all the time. It was next, 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 let's go here. So the next element of making music is the thing that stimulates, you know? And the stimulation continues beyond Zeppelin for me. I mean, it doesn't carry the same importance or the same weight as far as a mass media observation, but for me, my heart is, you know, part of it is dominated by music.
Well, that's an interesting point. Because you are so into music and so many different styles of music, I often wondered, if Zeppelin hadn't broke up, would you have still, do you think you would have still been able to get all this different music and all these different elements you want to explore out?
I don't know. It's one of those questions. Be hard to tell, because some things you have to do on your own. I mean, when I went to Morocco initially, I was so blown away by the music that I said to Jimmy, you've got to come and hear this. You know, and we took some recording equipment and went into the Atlas Mountains. And we had a fantastic time, wild time. I mean, talk about Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas or whatever. I mean, it was superb. But some things, a lot of things you can't do in a group mentality. You have to, these experiences, you have to deal with them yourself. Taking it on through, Calling to You, you were talking about before from Faded Nations, was a really big moment musically. And also the achievement of the piece of music was strong, relentless, and it was very, very strident, and I think that was very important. And finally, Timbuktu. Who would have ever thought that me, little old rocker from the Black Country who started off at 17, would end up sitting around a fire in the Sahara Desert in the middle of the night, singing quietly with Ali Farka Touré.
Well, I want to get into that a little bit more in just a few minutes, because that's pretty interesting stuff. I've got plenty more coming up with Robert Plant as we continue all day on VH1 Classic from London.
You're watching Robert Plant all day long on VH1 Classic.
Truly one of my career highlights, having the opportunity to be here in London, sit down and spend some time all day with legendary Robert Plant. Thank you so much.
That's very kind of you to be so honest.
And this Tuesday, November 4th, Robert is celebrating the release of 66 to Timbuktu, a 2-disc, 35-track anthology that includes rare and previously unreleased recordings, as well as solo hits such as Tall Cool One and Big Log. Well, Robert, clearly everybody knows about your solo work after Led Zeppelin, but I think with this anthology, people will be a bit surprised to learn about the bands you were in before Led Zeppelin. Tell us a little bit about your working with bands like Band of Joy, Obstweedle was another one that you had. Tell us how those early experiences shaped your career later on.
Well, the Band of Joy was probably the most formative and successful and original band that I was in previous to Led Zeppelin. And it was, I had 3 or 4 Band of Joys. The first incarnation was like a soul band doing stuff out of Memphis, James Carr stuff, Otis Clay, the Chicago stuff, Tyrone Davis. There was a lot of soul. It was based on a sort of soul chug. And some of the guys were from an area in England where, in the end, a lot of reggae came out of. There was a lot of big black feel to it. And it was cool, but a lot of people were playing this kind of music and nobody got close to the black guys. They got the thing down and we were looking like it was pretty shabby. So by the time the big Band of Joy was formed, I'd moved straight across musically into a kind of mixture of blues and psychedelic rock. And I think that band really was the most successful for me as far as its content and the intentions. The personnel, John Bonham was the drummer, and Kevin Gammon played guitar. He was known then as, with the unassuming title of Carlisle Egypt. And we played as many underground freak out clubs as we could get into. And it was pretty stated, pretty interesting music. And it had a lot of, it did have an effect on Led Zeppelin 1. The Zeppelin 1, the first album, contained a lot of Yardbird influence, a lot of the Jimmy Page influence, but also Bonham and I brought an attitude that was part of the Band of Joy. I was spotted by Jimmy. He came up to see me when he was looking for a singer for the Yardbirds. Terry Reid, my old friend, had recommended that he should come and see me. And I was playing with this band called Obs Tweedle in a completely empty room in the dark. And it was not the greatest experience on earth for anybody, I don't think. But somehow or another, they must have been just a bit short of, you know, vocalists that week, because you would not have known from the band that I was in that it was going to be the sort of ticket to go around the corner and start creating all that stuff.
Right, right.
You know.
Well, you worked with another great guitarist who you mentioned earlier, Robbie Blunt. One of the first big solo hits that you had after Led Zeppelin was Big Log, and I think Robbie's guitar work on that is just so distinctive. Talk a little bit more, if you can, about that particular track, and also how you found Robbie and how he came to be involved, the impact he made on your solo career.
Well, Robbie Blunt was a guitarist in the town where I came from. He was a very accomplished guy who was very much into Freddie King, into that kind of Texas pop blues on Federal Records or whatever it is. And he really had got that whole lilt down, somewhere between Eric Clapton's work with John Mayall's Blues Breakers. And he was very much of a fan of that sort of stuff. And he and I had known each other for a long time. And I suggested that we try and write together. Now, that's a kind of odd thing. It's like me knowing you for 10 years and then saying, hey, why don't we write a song tomorrow? Right. It was an interesting time. His contribution on 3 records was really strong. It was very, very good and very tuneful and melodic. And the Big Log piece was very typical and very appropriate for his playing. It was really quite a good moment for him. And it's a sweet song. And it's about a guy who's just got to keep moving down the road to find that, you know, angel with a broken wing.
Great video as well.
Actually, not a broken wing, that's the wrong chap, sorry.
Plenty more to come as I continue with Robert Plant here in London. I'm here at the Karma Holistic Center in London, the Camden section of London, and for very good reason. We've come to London to spend time with Robert Plant, who's been gracious enough to hang out with us. Robert, thank you.
Thank you too.
New in stores in just a couple of days, Tuesday, November 4th to be exact, is 66 to Timbuktu, a 2-disc, 35-track anthology that spans Robert Plant's career outside of Led Zeppelin. Now, Robert, as a kid, my parents would often bang on my door in the bedroom. The music was too loud. They'd yell at me for all this crazy rock and roll I was playing. Some of it you made, actually. Your parents actually had a bit more of a drastic approach from something I read. Is it true that they actually cut the plug off your record player? And if so, what were you listening to that inspired such drastic actions?
Yeah, they were very inventive. They told me so many times, you know, that wasn't the kind of music that a nice sort of working class white boy should be listening to. So I tried to explain to them that there were more people in the world than just the people that lived in our street, and that people had got something to say. Anyway, it didn't wash very well. They cut the plug off for sure. It was a different time though, you know. I mean, England really did, after the Second World War, it was very difficult to pull the English psyche and mentality out of the war period. And so austerity was here. It was very tough living. And the whole idea of frivolity and another culture, a bohemian culture, and, you know, looking across at black music and the black lifestyle, it was quite a frightening thing. We're talking about 1962 or whatever it was. You know, so it was very challenging to the people who'd gone through the war, you know, my father and my mother, they didn't want me like that. They wanted me to be squeaky clean, white, clean and neat, looking good and becoming the world's greatest accountant. And, you know, quite rightly so. Trouble is, you've only got one life. So I just needed that fix. I just needed to hear that kind of music. I needed to hear black American pop from New Orleans. And I needed to hear it from LA and from New York and from Dallas. I needed that real black root. I didn't know why. At the time, I had no idea. I just found it was so much more substantial and it had so much more meaning. I mean, yeah, the difference between later on, if you look at what happened later, the difference between the Castles and Jimi Hendrix is a million miles.
Later on, what happened with your parents as you got more into the music scene? Were they supportive at that point?
Well, I didn't go back for a few years. When I went back, my appearance had changed so dramatically, they asked me if I could come at night. So it was a bit of a... I said, oh yeah, okay. And yeah, they weren't so much supportive as astonished, I think.
Right.
And bless them, you know, because they never asked what squeeze my lemon meant. Or, you know, the whole idea of Robert Johnson being some kind of guiding light to everybody's lyrical content. They just went, wow, how can this be good for anybody, I suppose.
Moving forward a bit, and another great track on the new anthology, 66 to Timbuktu, is Little by Little, which comes from Shaken and Stirred, 1985. It's actually one of my favorite tracks that you did as a solo artist, and I think it just sounds amazing, that song, still to this day. Just sonically, it just has such a great, clean feel to it. I'm wondering, a lot of people felt that that period and that record in particular for you was a bit more experimental.
That's a very polite way of putting it, yeah.
Well, and they say some of it maybe even inspired by the work Peter Gabriel was doing at the time. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I think I like the way that Peter Gabriel had moved on. He left behind a sort of progressive rock band who were quite... I mean, the thing is, success breeds complacency, and bands do, once they've got a theme that works, you can't actually stay with that theme for too long, you know. I didn't do that, Zeppelin didn't do that, but Gabriel got out. He got out for all the right reasons, and he started making records which were very interesting. For instance, he'd make an entire album where there would be no cymbals, because do you need to hear that? You don't need to hear things, you just become accustomed to it. So I wanted to make a record where there was no guitar solos, but every time the drummer played a fill, the guitar would follow the drum fill. It was like a kind of... It became more syncopated, and everybody in the band thought I was completely nuts. And the band ultimately split up at the end of all that. But I wanted to try and go places where you actually turn the music round on itself, and by its success, you can see that not many people enjoyed it that much, but in truth, Little by Little was a great moment. It was put together really well. There were a couple of tracks on that album that I still really enjoy.
Yeah, it's definitely.
But it was certainly, for me, it was just moving on, farther and farther away from point A, from when I was 17. Oh, really? Then I was 35, you know, I was gone.
I still have so much to come with Robert Plant from London as we continue on VH1 Classic. Robert Plant is celebrating the release of 66 to Timbuktu, which includes all of his solo hits as well as a bunch of rare and previously unreleased gems. It's a true collector's item for fans, and you'll be happy to hear it arrives in stores this Tuesday, November 4th. As I continue here in London at Karma Holistic Center with Robert Plant, just getting caught up on so many different things, so many different aspects of your career. I know one of the things I did as soon as I got here to London was hit the record stores, because I'm somewhat of a record collector myself. Yeah. I hear that you also like to collect records, maybe rock and roll, rockabilly records, and are you somewhat of a vinyl junkie? Do you miss the old days of vinyl?
I don't feel that they've gone, really. Most of the records that you really want have already been made, the vinyl side of things. And some great releases that are coming out now, especially in Europe, I don't know about in the States, are pressed in vinyl as well.
Yeah.
So there really, really is a difference in the sound reproduction. And it just goes to show, just fancy that the record companies for years have been stitching us up and ripping us off by saying, hey, you know, get this CD, the inflated prices of the compact disc and the inferior sound quality means that if you can track down vinyl, it's all that much better. I just inherited a record collection.
Really?
Yeah, and there's about 3,000 7-inch singles, and I'm going through them bit by bit on my record player off. You know, I've got two piles: keep, dump, keep, dump. And in England, we have these things called record fairs. I don't know whether you have them in America.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah. So, you know, I'm going to get myself a stall. I'm going to rent myself a house in the shade of the freeway. Oh, no, I didn't say that. Jackson Brown. I'm going to get a stall and stick these 45s in there and sit behind looking disinterested.
Are you really?
With a woolly hat on, yeah. And try and get rid of, I mean, how many people want Pat Boone 45s?
I don't know, but I'd suggest you hire somebody to do it for you because...
Oh, no, I want to know what it's like. I want to communicate with people who are as obsessed as I am about, you know, particular periods of time in music.
When you tour, is that an opportunity for you to get out there and visit stores? Are you always on the search?
Yeah, there's dime stores still around the States. And here there are, people know what's going on now. I mean, you know, there are certain records, a lot of records, and particular labels that carry a premium price just because of the label itself,
right.
Which is great. It's great, you know.
Right.
You could do that, or you could take the numbers of railway locomotives as they go by. You know, that's train spotters, we call them over here. It's a sad thing. In England, the term is called anorak. Anybody who's an anorak is a guy who wears a coat with one of those hoods with a fluffy thing round, and they spend hours in the rain with a pencil and paper writing down totally useless numbers of railway trains and stuff. And the vinyl junkies put into the same category.
Interesting.
Sad, rather than interesting, actually.
Going forward into your solo career again and talking about all the great music that is on the Anthology 66 and Timbuktu, you've worked with a lot of different artists, some of them we've touched on already. One of the artists that you worked with as a drummer is Phil Collins on some of your solo stuff. I'm interested to know how Phil ended up becoming involved with you as a solo artist and what it is that you saw in his playing that you thought would make you guys a good match.
Well, he and I were both, at that time, on Atlantic Records. He'd left, well, he was part of Genesis, but he got this whole thing going. And it was just prior to the release of In the Air Tonight, about 1982, 81. And he and I met because of our mutual friendship with a guy called Phil Carson, who was working at Atlantic Records at the time, who was a great catalyst and has always had a huge enthusiasm for music and for all the possibilities that could take place. And I met Phil and spoke to him, and he said he was such a big Zeppelin fan, and he knew I was making a cutting-edge solo record, and he wanted to hear the kind of stuff I was doing. So I played him one or two of the... I don't think in those days we really did demos that much. You know, we knew what we were going to do. There was no big, long process about making a record. But I played him some of the stuff, and he said, I can do that. And he turned up, and he was so on the ball, and so up, and such a positive force around the first two solo albums that I made. He was really, a great breath of very pure, clear whirlwind.
And he later went on to perform with Zeppelin, actually. Was it at Live Aid?
That wasn't Zeppelin, that was John Paul Jones, Jimmy Page, and me.
Right. Yeah. But he actually played with you guys as well at that, right?
He played in England.
Which was an extension from the solo.
He played in England, and then he played in Philly with Tony Thompson on drums. And then I think he did a bit of juggling somewhere, maybe did a little bit of prestidigitation somewhere in a nightclub. It was a full day for him.
Yeah, I bet. I bet.
And then he became King of England for a minute. And I love him still.
Lots still to do as I continue with Robert Plant in London on VH1 Classic. I'm here at the Karma Holistic Center in the Camden section of London, joined by Robert Plant, who was just talking about possibly partaking in some of the holistic benefits of karma. Thank you so much for joining us.
Well, I haven't seen anything holistic yet, but there's a couple of models just gone past. I don't know whether they become... Yeah, I'm very glad to be here.
Robert Plant's latest, and it's a big one, folks, is called 66 to Timbuktu, and it's 35 tracks from his incredible career outside of Led Zeppelin. Some of the tracks included on the anthology that come out Tuesday, November 4th, are from as far back as 1966, and one was recorded this year in, you got it, Timbuktu. Robert, one of the covers that appears on the new anthology is Hey Joe. Now, a lot of people are familiar with Jimi Hendrix's version of this. Your version is dramatically different. Tell us a little bit about the recording of Hey Joe, and did Hendrix's version in any way influence or inspire you to do it?
Yeah, yes. Hendrix's arrival on the British scene was an absolute, it was the most crucial and exciting moment. It blasted. I mean, English music was changing, but Hendrix had he was such a master, and he had so little real consideration for the business or the order of popular music over here. So when he turned up, he went on the only British TV show that actually pushed pop music called Top of the Pops. And he did this version of Hey Joe, and the whole country was aroused. People either detested it and wanted to know what was going on, but for us guys who were into the blues and into that kind of existentialist, angular music, Hendrix was like, wow. And he really did arrive, bang. And yeah, he had a huge, profound effect on everybody. Now, Hey Joe had been played also by a group called Love from California with Arthur Lee. He did a very staccato version of it, and it was a song that was known. It has a kind of checkered past, and to me it always sounded like, and I mean I recorded a version of it recently with Strange Sensation on the Dreamland album. It sounds like a kind of folk song, it sounds like a gallows pole. It's got a story, it talks about, you know, I mean the lyric is simple, but it's still effective, and it sounds like a Frankie and Johnny kind of tune, you know, something about treachery and cheating and the bleeding heart and all that stuff. So yeah, it was a cool song to do, and we were influenced by Hendrix, obviously, because the bass line that he and Noel Redding play on the original single is right there. But the power and the machine gun-like techniques of Hendrix were very effective, and they had a great influence on the band of Joy.
So much more to do as we continue here, talking to Robert Plant all day, hanging out on VH1 Classic. Oh, this is just a great day. I'm here in London to visit with Robert Plant, talking about his great new CD, 66 to Timbuktu. Robert, it's been great spending time with you, and I thank you for hanging out some more with us.
Thank you. I'm enjoying it. No end.
There are 2-disc anthologies, and then there are 2-disc anthologies. Arriving in stores this Tuesday, November 4th, 66 to Timbuktu, a 35-track collection of all of Robert Plant's solo hits. Now, 66 to Timbuktu also includes some of your earlier blues-style recordings. Tell us, what is your definition of the blues, and what is it that you find about the blues that attracts you to it as a singer?
Well, I don't really have a definition, because I should say that just the actual scales of the music are so alluring and so addictive to me. The way that the performance takes place, the kind of very unholy delivery, from Howlin' Wolf to Robert Johnson, Skip James, Son House. These guys were growling and barking and playing a musical form which was really shunned in its time. I mean, really, really almost outlawed. It was the music of, they called it the devil's music. I mean, that's become as much of a sort of a moniker now as heavy metal or whatever it is. But in truth, they were definitely playing music which was for the wrong side of the tracks. And there was a certain amount of commerciality about it, because the guys that we know of made records. They weren't somewhere in a shack, never to be heard of and only to be spoken about as if they were part of King Solomon's mines. They were actually making records and trying to make money. And their music was very alluring, and it obviously had an effect right the way down through time, right through to today. You know, what I heard moved me and stirred me from an environment of, you know, a very dour, grey United Kingdom. Britain really didn't have a great deal musically to offer when I was 12 or 13. We were all buying American music. And in the middle of the Everly Brothers and stuff like that, Bo Diddley and Chuck Berry were pointing us back towards Muddy Waters and Howlin' Wolf. And they in turn referenced earlier musicians. And there was a whole movement towards that music. And I found that when I went to the desert recently, and all the years that I've been going to Morocco, and I've met people along the way, there is a root that comes from there, from Africa, that is still untouched. Not untouched, it's still, its very earliest points of reference are still alive and being called contemporary music in parts of Africa. And it's beautiful music. I have no reason why, I can't explain why I didn't end up just hanging out with Glenn Campbell. Because I really like what he does too, you know, but I just got this whole edge. Maybe it was because people like Hendrix and the very early Rolling Stones and Alexis Corner, who, you know, I do this duet with on this collection, really had an almost encyclopedic knowledge of this music. And we were exposed in tiny, weeny little glimpses to a totally different world.
Well, we've talked about a number of the different artists that you've worked with, many who appear on the new anthology, 66 to Timbuktu. One of the artists is Jules Holland that appears on the CD. A lot of people know Jules from his work with Squeeze.
That's right.
Tell us a little bit about the track that you recorded with Jules, Let the Boogie Woogie Roll, because that was originally for his record, and it's also on the new anthology, right?
Yeah, Jules, when he left Squeeze, he started developing his piano style, or bringing it out more as a commercial proposition. And he really is a fine, fine, fine piano player. And his whole forte now, and his whole persona in Britain and in Europe, is based on big band boogie, sort of Ray Charles and beyond. He's also quite an icon in this country because he has a major TV show, which is one of the only shows in Europe that exposes radically different music forms, and it's very popular because mainstream TV here, as in America, really just gives you the kind of cornbread average pop music, you know. And so his reputation is very strong. I recorded this song for a New Year's Eve Hogmanay show, and I performed with Jimmy Cliff, Solomon Burke, Tom Jones, Chrissy Hine from the Pretenders, all in the one show. And the Strokes, I think, were on it. It was great, and his shows are always like that. In fact, when I leave you now, I'm going off to do some more work with him this afternoon. Yeah, because he's really a diamond, and he's given the opportunity on national radio and TV to stretch the music.
Sounds very eclectic.
Yeah, well, it's not eclectic. It's just, I mean, eclectic means now, it means experimental and challenging, but it also means eclectic covers music that can't be heard on mainstream radio. Right. And that isn't necessarily eclectic, it's just it doesn't fit.
Right.
You know, and that's the sad place that we've gotten to now, where everything is kind of running like that. So Jules is a cool guy, he's got a big career going for himself over here, and he's up for anything. He will play. This afternoon he's going to have to be a country pianist from Nashville when I get there.
Well, much more to come as I continue with Robert Plant here in London on VH1 Classic. I'd like to thank Robert Plant for spending the day with us. It's certainly been a dream of mine to be able to sit here in London and spend some time talking with you about all this great stuff. Thank you so much.
It's been a pleasure. I've really had a good time. I'm very proud of unearthing these old nuggets. And yeah, I mean, there's a sense of humor in there and some great achieving moments for me too. Thank you.
The old nuggets Robert just referred to can be found on his great new 2-disc anthology, 66 to Timbuktu. The 35-track collection arrives in music stores near you this Tuesday, November 4th. So Robert, we've covered a lot of things about your past. What about the future? What's next for you?
Well, I've just come from the mountains of Wales, where I've been working on the side of the hill. It's like music from Big Green rather than Big Pink. We've been writing new songs for a Strange Sensations album. We've got about 15 tracks written, which are very strong and powerful, and that's what I've been doing. And I've also been playing a lot of tennis. Oh yeah, I don't know why. If I'd have gone to bed earlier in the 70s, I might have had a different career now, you know. A bit late now, I think.
So music and sports are really your two great loves that keep your time occupied.
They're the safest things I can do. Yeah.
Well, so when can we look forward to this album?
Oh, I've no idea. I should say before the summer next year, maybe, because I'd like to be back in the States playing all those very peculiar gigs in Wisconsin that I'm longing to get back to.
Well, one of the great songs from your 80s portion of your solo career, Heaven Knows, marked a time where you reunited, or I should say united with Phil Johnstone. Talk about some of the contributions that Phil made to your solo career, both as a keyboardist and a songwriter.
Well, Phil is a very flamboyant character, very self-assured, and he's helped the national debt of Portugal no end by drinking as much port as we could import into Britain. And he would belligerate himself through a packet of cigarettes and a couple of bottles of port and tell me assuredly that we had the key to the future of rock and roll. And if you work with a guy like that, it's so much fun that we just wrote incessantly. We were writing and trying out new ideas, new songs. One week we'd be doing a particular track. We wrote a song which I was going to put on this album, but it wasn't quite finished, this compilation. It's called That Ain't Me Singing, It's Another Guy. And we got these schoolgirls to do this rap about all the people who copied my voice over the years. And it's like a skanking thing where they're referring all the time to how all these guys who are named all make it to the bank on a Friday to put their money in from being sycophants, you know, carbon copies. And we wrote loads of great songs together. We had a very colourful relationship. And in the end, I think he was elected either Pope or President of some up-and-coming country.
Really?
Yeah, I think he's just gone off somewhere and taken holy orders. And
if you do a song like that, you should also sample everybody else's music because they've sampled enough of yours over the years.
That's right, yeah. It's kind of funny, isn't it, really? But we nicked a load of stuff as well. I mean, there's nothing new under the sun, really. It's all, you know, there's only so many notes that you can play around with. So plagiarism is, you know, it's the name of the game. Tell that to the Beastie Boys or Muddy Waters, you know. Everything comes from somewhere else.
It's been a great treat hanging out with you. I really appreciate the time, and it was great to talk about all this.
Cool, thanks a lot.